Today I'm going to show you guys how to frame a typical deck in Revit, just like this, with some custom families and details. Stay tuned. Alright, before we get into this, I want to kind of show you guys some of the families that we're going to be using. Maybe I'll do another tutorial at a later point. Let me know in the comments if that's something that y'all want to see on how to create some of these, but they're pretty in-depth families, and it's just because I took the time to set them up correctly to begin with so that we can continue to use them on all our projects. Things like these columns that have, the bolts built in, the footers built in, they graphically show correctly in elevation and plan. It's easy to document when we're putting together construction documents. Also, different types of boards for our decking. There's multiple ways we can do decking when we're doing the flooring there, but the way that I typically do it, the way that I've found is the easiest for what we're trying to get out of this is using generic families for our decking, and I'll show you how we do that. Also, things like the joists, these have actually built-in hangers that you can turn on and off with a simple toggle. But if that's something that y'all are interested in seeing, maybe I'll put together a separate tutorial on how to put together some of these families. So let's go ahead and get started on building the deck. Okay, to start out, I'm just going to draw a wall. And this is just a standard concept wall, nothing special about it. This is just going to represent the exterior wall of the home. I'm also going to set up my levels. So I'm going to set up ground level. Let's call this ground level. And this wall is going to associate ground level to level 1, let's say 10 feet above. All right. So this is going to be the level of our deck. So going back to our plan here, I'm going to use the structure beams. And these are the families that I've created, like I said, that have the flexibility of showing your joist hangers and other elements, but that's what I'm going to use to create this deck. And honestly, I think it's the best practice doing that, considering this is a structure that you are creating with structural members. So I'm going to create a 16-foot deck, let's say. I'm also going to go ahead and just copy this over a couple times. These are going to represent the two exterior rim boards. This is going to represent the ledger board that's mounted to the actual home. We'll also have two more of these on each side, and that's going to represent the other two rim boards on either side. Again, from a code perspective, make sure you're framing this correctly. I'm going to move this up against the house, and actually the way these structured beams work is this is based off this center line naturally of these beams, but when you put the joist in between, they're going to associate to that point. So we're going to go ahead and change this justification point so that the joist connect to the outside there. So I'm going to have to move this over a little bit. So now you can see this point of drag is where these interior joists are going to connect to, and I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing over here to the inside, and you'll see what that does here in just a little bit. I'm also going to go ahead and just reference exterior side of this is going to be, again, we're going to want this to be at, let's say 12 feet. And you can see I'm kind of doing this real rough without too much thought behind it, but I want to go ahead and put the dimensions on it so we can get an idea for what size this is going to be. So you can see here when I move that to the edge that it snapped to the center. And that's what I was talking about. With this being justified in the middle, this beam automatically connects to the center of it. Now with this scenario, we want the justification to be to the outside. You can see now that those are both acting correctly for how we want to frame this thing. And this one, I'm just going to move it to the inside here. Now, when we do our deck framing, we like to stagger our joints on the outside. And I'll kind of show you what I mean by that. Again, this is going to the wrong side of that. Make sure this is 12 feet. So we like to stagger our joints. There's another way to do this if you keep having problems where you have elements wanting to connect to the center and do weird things. You can right click on that blue dot and disallow join, and that'll stop it from connecting to the next beam. Just like that one's doing there, right? So disallow join, we can connect that and drag it through. So this is how we like to do our corners. This outside rim board is staggered to the side rim boards. It's a cleaner detail from an outside perspective. You're only seeing one in cut, but from a structural standpoint, it's a little bit tighter as well. So we're going to go ahead and copy this over and do the same thing up here. Now I could just do the same process that I did. I'm just going to go ahead and mirror this over the center point of this beam. Kind of make things a little quicker. So I'm going to have to disallow join on this one as well and snap that in place. So now we kind of have our rim boards, two pretty much all the way around, and our ledger board up against the house. See what this thing's kind of looking like. You can see there, it's all shaping up pretty nice. So if we go back to the floor plan, now our goal is to put all the joists, and we're going to be framing this thing 16 inches on center. And so instead of doing individual beams, we can do a beam system in Revit, right? We're going to do a sketch beam system, do this square rectangle there, and just do inside to inside. Now you can see this double line up here. That is associating to which direction the beams are going to be running. So this beam direction we could change if we wanted the beams to be running this long direction, but we're going to be running them this short span here. So off to the side here, I'm going to go down to my 2x10 joists. Make sure my 2x10 joists are correct, and then I have fixed spacing at 16 inches on center. I'm also going to make sure the justification is set to beginning so that the 16 inches is based off of the first beam there. So I'm going to go ahead and click check, and now you can see all these joists are connecting nicely on either end. 16-inch span. Let's see what we got. 16 inches, which is great. Let's go to the perspective, and you can see here too, you got the hangers on there as well. So that's, again, a built-in element for these families that maybe I'll do another later video on. So going back to floor plan, we're going to be putting in a beam system. So we have a 2-foot cantilever with a beam. Again, depending on your local area code, you may or may not be allowed to do this, and the span may differ depending on where you live. So I'm just doing a 2-foot cantilever just for now to represent that. This line is just representing that 2-foot setback, and I'll go ahead and use the beam again. I'm going to do a 2x10 beam. We'll do a double joist beam as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark it end to end. Now it's going to be at the same level as the rest of these things, but that's not exactly what we want. We want this thing to support this whole deck. So I need to offset either end, -9 1/4. And that's just the depth of those joists, 2x10 joists. So that's looking good. We're going to go back to level 1. I'm just going to copy this over. So now we have a double, I can go ahead and delete this, double 2x10 beam holding up the deck there. It's looking good. Now let's put in some posts underneath this thing to help support that. And I'm just going to show you what we are working with. Now, based off those families that I originally showed you, I'm going to go ahead and go back to perspective so you can see this. So I'm going to select my single notch plus footer, and I'm going to make sure that is associated to the ground level. And then level 1 is going to be the top, but again, we're going to be offsetting that 9¼ inches. Now, the beauty of these columns, setting them up correctly to begin with, is that they are notched to fit that beam. It's beautiful, and it's got the 2 bolts already built in, so now when we go to detail this deck out, we don't have to spend time doing all the drafting views and detailing it when this is already drawn up appropriately. Okay, so go back to plan, and I like to personally array my columns. Make sure it's checked on last, and now I can say, I don't know, say we need 3 columns for this thing. It's coming together pretty quick, pretty nice. All right, so let's put on a floor. Now the floor can be done in several different ways. Like I said earlier, over the years, I've tried to get the most efficient way to do this, and for a long time we like to picture frame our decks, and for a long time I was just using a floor, and I'll show you what that could possibly look like. So we would picture frame our deck, something like that, offset it 5½ inches for the board width. And set up our picture frame. Right, and our picture frame would be something like that, and then we would do an interior board. I'm just going to show you a couple different ways of doing this real quick. Right, and then we could array this. That's something that we wanted to do. Let's say, I don't know how many we'll need. Oop, that's my mistake. Do an array, do second one, do 6 inches. Right, so you can do something like that, and it looks good. There's nothing really wrong with it, except the issue that we run into, or the issue that we have with this, is that we're not going to be able to schedule these boards. So right now, with everything else, I can schedule the quantities. Let me go to the schedule sheet. So framing, I can schedule my 2x10s, give the lengths and the quantities, and schedule my columns, but the deck schedule doesn't populate. So to avoid this, let me just back up here. We use our generic families, and we have several different families here we can use, and I'll go ahead and just show you. So I have this family set up so it can have a double miter, a miter on one end, a miter on the other end, and then their standard board. So our standard board is just going to be a square cut. And some of you may think, this is kind of a little overkill, or maybe this is a little bit more time consuming. The floor method works great. And some of you may be thinking, why don't you use the beam system that you use for the 2x10 joists? The issue with that is there's a lot of cleanup that goes into it. I can show you a sample again of the beam system. If I wanted to offset this 1 inch, if I wanted to put on do the square. If I wanted to do the deck joists, again running the long way, and I'm going to change this to decking boards, and do deck boards, and let's say 6 inches on center, click apply, click OK. This is kind of what it looks like. And whether it's pretty quick, you can see that you have a lot of cleanup issues on edges and around the border there. And when joists or when beams overlap, and because you did this as a beam system as well, you have beams on top of beams, you have a lot of weird funky conditions. And because this is a rectangular, you could probably get this to work out pretty smooth. But if you had any odd shaped deck or curved deck or anything like that, you're going to start running into some odd conditions. So I like to personally use these generic models, and then again, they will start to schedule in the actual decking schedule as well. So let's go ahead and just put together, let's go ahead and go with I'm going to rotate this 90. I'm just going to move it down here. And now you can see this is 12 feet, so I want to make sure that this member is 12 feet long. Move that into place. I'm going to copy this one over, change it to B, rotate it around. Again, make sure it is the correct length. And then I'm going to have another one that's the double miter, like so. Now double check we didn't really run a string here. That's 15 and 11 and a quarter, so that's a really odd size, but fits within our 16-foot deck boards. So we can make that work. So now you got a picture frame. You're actually showing the miter cuts on the corners, which is a nice little detail. I'm just going to pop a measurement from inside deck board to inside deck board to make sure that we got the right 15 and a quarter. And we're doing an 1/8 inch space, so this is going to be 15 feet. I'm going to go ahead and pop this on this corner here. I'm going to offset it 1/8 in both directions so we have our proper spacing for our deck boards. And now I can array this. When I array it, I'm going to make sure I go to the second. We'll probably do 24 boards maybe. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then I'm just going to copy this last one. Now this last one, ungroup it. It's going to be a unique member. And because this distance here from the house to here is 3.5, we're going to make this 3 3/8 for that spacing. Be able to pop that back into place, and now we have our full deck system with the miters, very clean, and we have all the decking scheduled. Looks really good. Okay, now last one, actually, you can see here that last one that we just made popped up a different size, and it's not showing the, I'll show you that. This is no type mark. So we're doing 5/4 by 6. You got it. Now it's correct. Okay. So this deck's looking pretty good. Looks like we may need some angle bracing on these two columns and then slap on the rail. So let's do that angle bracing actually real quick. So again, this is just a family that I had created that we use on all our projects. Any decks that need these ankle bracings, it's just a nice thing to have. It's quick and easy. Once you have the library of families that you use for stuff, these projects can go pretty quickly. So let me go ahead and see where we're at here. Go ahead and align one into the other. That looks good. I'm just going to go to our elevation here, mirror this over that center column, and now we got deck bracing with all the correct bolts. Looking good. Okay, now let's do the railing. So the railing, again, we're going to use one of these columns, 4x4 column deck rail. You can see it there. I'm just going to place it here for reference. Now you can see this looks really tall, but what we want it to do is we want it to be 9 inches below level 1 so that it can bolt to this rim board. And then we're going to do 2 foot 10.5 tall. And the reason we're not doing 3 feet tall is because we're going to do a 2x6 cap along the entire rail. So I'm just going to align this to the edge of the column and then align that there. I'm going to copy this 3 times. Again, I like to array my columns. I think it's a little bit more convenient. It's easy to space. Okay, so I'm going to array again to last. We're going to go ahead and put this guy there to the corner. Let's do, what is this, 12 feet? Let's do, oh, it's 4. We'll do 4. That looks good. I'm going to rotate this one. I'm going to move it to the corner as well. And then array it down, again making sure last is checked. Let's do 5 along the front there. That looks pretty good. We'll move this one to the corner. Array it down to the edge. And again, we're going to do 4. Let's see, this thing's shaping up. It's looking pretty good. Again, with the recessed bolt holes, it's looking good. It makes detailing really nice, and it makes the renderings look really good that we provide for our client as well. Okay, we're going to go ahead and pop in a railing. Again, this is just a typical 2x2 deck railing with 2x4 cross members there. And we're just going to run this thing along the edge. Now with railings, we may need to offset this. Yeah, about 1 inch. Well, maybe not quite much. That's pretty close right there. It's looking pretty good. Pretty good. Alright, last thing really is just to put this cap on the rail, and then we're done. So for the cap, with this unique condition, you can do a couple things. We could use this generic model if we wanted to do that and just copy it over. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and do that. Copy this over. I'm going to call this 2x6. Make sure that our thickness is appropriate. And this is going to be set at 3 feet. A little high, 2 foot 10.5. There you go. Let's go back to level 1. So with this, we're actually going to be trying to go to the outside corner here. So the distance from there to here is 12 foot 3.5. So we need to adjust that. 12 foot 3.5. I'll bump it over. That looks good. Go ahead and mirror this guy. Beautiful. Copy this one as well and adjust it, duplicate it. It's going to be 2x6. And I need to actually change the type mark for it to schedule appropriately. See what this distance is from outside corner to outside corner. 16, 7.25 foot. Change that thickness. We'll go make sure it's at the correct level, 2 foot 10.5. We can move that thing over to the corner. So now we have our finished deck here, looking really good. Got the 2x6 top rail on our railing. Finished up real nice. Got a lot of details already in this. That was really quick. Go back to schedules. Everything's scheduling appropriately. Gives it the quantity that we need for every item. The only thing really that this doesn't take into consideration is your 2x2 balusters and the 2x4 top and bottom rails for the actual railing. That's something that you may have to count on a linear foot basis, but overall, really clean. Let me know what y'all think about this video, and if y'all want me to do any more videos very similar to this, go ahead and leave a comment down in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.